Today we're embarking on a really tailored exploration for you, the learner. We've got some fascinating historical research you shared, and our mission is to uncover some surprising historical links in places you might not expect.
Exactly. We're going to be looking into the presence and I guess the influence of Georgian slaves in Ottoman Tripoli. That's present-day Libya, of course, during the 18th and 19th centuries.
Right.
It sounds maybe a bit niche, but I think we'll find it reveals some really remarkable things about the wider Ottoman Empire and, its global interactions.
Precisely. You gave us some really compelling stuff, including this paper, Georgian Slaves in Ottoman Tripoli, which uses Arabic, European, and Georgian sources. Quite a mix.
A real tapestry, yeah.
So our goal is to unpack all that and really get a handle on the role these individuals played in, well, a less talked about corner of the Ottoman world. Okay, let's dive straight in. How big a deal was the enslavement of Georgians back then?
Well, the scale is pretty striking, actually. Our sources show it was a substantial business, unfortunately profitable, for both the Ottomans and the Persians.
Wow.
Yeah, we're talking thousands of Georgians, young people, adults, men, women kidnapped or sold off. And this had a huge impact on Georgia itself.
Thousands. When we think about slavery then, we often think Istanbul, Egypt, maybe Baghdad.
The big centers.
But these sources paint a wider picture, don't they?
They really do. I mean, those places were key, no doubt. But recent Georgian research shows they were sent much further afield. Syria, Afghanistan, India, and crucially for us, North Africa. Places like Algeria, Tunisia, Tripoli, even Morocco.
Really? Morocco, too?
Yeah. And we have this early reference, a letter from Cathaliokos Damenti IV back in the 1720s. He actually mentions 50 Georgian boys being sold to Arabia and Algeria.
50 boys.
Just like that. So what's the sort of historical backdrop here? How did this happen on such a scale? Well, if you look at the bigger picture, a key moment was the Peace of Amasya in 1555. That basically split Georgia between the Ottomans and the Safavids.
Okay.
That set the stage. Then later, the Safavid Empire collapsed around 1722. This meant Ottoman influence grew in eastern Georgia, leading to what the research calls a stream of Georgian Mamluks entering Ottoman lands.
The Mamluks. Those were the slave soldiers, administrators.
Exactly. Often non-Ottoman, but they could become incredibly powerful within the system.
And the effect back in Georgia must have been devastating.
Absolutely. The sources say that after centuries of this, Georgia's population, east and west combined, had crashed to under 500,000 by 1800.
500,000.
Yeah, it really highlights a terrible human cost. So, okay, let's focus on Tripoli. By the late 1500s, it's part of the Ottoman Empire. What about the people actually running the show there?
Yeah, this part's really interesting. It seems the ruling elites in these North African places, the Deys in Algeria, Beys in Tunisia, the Karamanli family in Tripoli, they were often seen as outsiders, foreigners. Visitors often just call them Turks.
That's a key point. And this ruling class, they deliberately kept themselves separate from the locals. One big way they did this, importing foreign men, Turkish and non-Turkish, for the army and administration, and foreign women for their harems, of course.
So it wasn't strictly about being ethnically Turkish?
No, not really. The research suggests there wasn't some kind of pure Turkish elite running Tripoli. You also had a lot of renegades.
Renegades.
Yeah, former Christian slaves who'd converted to Islam. They came from all over Europe, Greece, the Balkans, and they often reached really high positions: government, army, navy.
Okay, and where do Georgians and other Caucasians fit in?
Well, initially they were part of this pattern, maybe fewer of them compared to others. But as more Georgian slaves hit the Ottoman markets, their numbers in Tripoli grew too.
Right.
And we have some great little snippets from travelers. Like, a British guy in the late 1700s wrote that Yusuf Pasha was heartbroken over a favorite Mamluk dying, saying he'd spent more on him than any other two. And he mentioned Tripoli's Mamluks came from Arabia, Georgia, and other places adjacent.
Wow, that suggests a real personal connection, or maybe just how valuable they were strategically.
Could be both. And it wasn't just him. About 25 years later, another traveler noted that Tripoli's Mamluks were renegades, bought in Georgia and Circassia, held the top jobs, and crucially, that the Pasha's daughters could only marry them.
Only marry them. That really cements their importance in the ruling class, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It shows just how integrated these foreign-born individuals became at the very top. So, okay, we've set the scene. Let's get into some specific Georgians who made their mark in Tripoli.
Excellent. Where do we start? The earliest known example.
Yeah, the research points to a Hussein Abbaszadeh. He was an official of Abkhaz origin. Abkhazia is a region in the Caucasus near Georgia. He was active in Tripoli politics way back in the late 17th century, around 1679 to 1683.
So Caucasians were there pretty early on.
Seems so. But fast forward to the 18th century, and we get clearer evidence of Georgians, especially in diplomacy.
Diplomats. Georgian diplomats from Tripoli.
Yep. Two specific cases from the 1770s. First, Hassan Grugi. He was appointed Tripoli's ambassador to Venice in spring 1770. We see him mentioned in Venetian letters up to 1773.
The ambassador to Venice.
Okay.
Then there's Ibrahim Gurgi Apaga. He was appointed ambassador to Britain in 1773.
To Britain, that's a major posting. What do we know about his time there? I mean, it says something about how the Ottomans viewed Palin, right? Sending someone of slave origin on such a mission.
It really does, and we actually have this great report in the Gentleman's Magazine about his private audience with King George III in September 1773.
No kidding. With the king.
Yeah. He even brought 10 horses as a gift from the Pasha of Tripoli. He stayed in Britain until summer 1774, then went back to Tripoli with his family. It's quite something, isn't it? A Georgian representing Ottoman Tripoli in London.
Absolutely incredible. It really messes with your assumptions about power back then. Now, you mentioned someone who even briefly ruled Tripoli. A Georgian. Yes. This is Ali Jazerli, also known as Burgul Gorgi. That Gorgi part clearly flags his Georgian roots. He was born around 1754, started out as a Georgian slave belonging to the ruler of Algiers.
Okay, so he started in Algiers.
Right. And he rose high there, oversaw ports, customs, the navy. He even married a relative of the ruler.
So how did he jump from Algiers to ruling Tripoli?
Well, after the Algerian ruler died, Ali had rivals. But luckily for him, his brother was in the service of a very powerful figure, the Ottoman Capudan Pasha, the Grand Admiral, Ghazi Hassan. And Ghazi Hassan was also Georgian.
Ah, the connections.
Exactly. Using these connections, Ali got a decree from the Sultan making him Pasha of Tripoli. He sailed in, kicked out the old ruler in 1793.
Wow. A Georgian slave takes over an Ottoman province. What was his rule like?
Well, he had some local support at first. His brother helped him get sailors, some apparently claimed descent from ancient Colchis in Georgia and resources, but his rule quickly turned brutal.
Not a fairy tale ending then.
No. It led to war with Tunisia, and in 1794, the old Karamanli family, backed by Tunisian troops led by another Georgian Mamluk, Mustafa Kuja, attacked Tripoli.
So Georgians fighting Georgians in a way. His time was short.
Very short. Ali had to flee to Egypt in early 1795. There he joined up with another famous Georgian Mamluk, Murad Bey. He even fought against Napoleon at the Battle of the Pyramids in 1798.
Against Napoleon, this guy's life is like a movie script.
Isn't it? Later, he advised another Georgian, Yusuf Ziauddin Pasha, in Syria. Eventually, he got himself appointed Pasha of Egypt by the Sultan, but he was murdered almost as soon as he arrived in 1803.
What a life. From slavery to ruler, fighting Napoleon, then murdered. It really shows how volatile things were and the crazy journeys people took.
It really does. Now, another key name that pops up is Mustafa Gurgi, right?
Yes, absolutely. He seems like another major player.
Definitely. Mustafa Gurgi is a really compelling figure in Tripoli in the first half of the 19th century. British records say he was a Georgian slave, bought in Istanbul before 1809 as a gift for Yusuf Pasha.
A gift who rose through the ranks.
And fast. By 1810, he's the receiver of the customs. That was apparently the third most important job in the Regency. He oversaw all the shipping, all the customs duties at the port. Huge responsibility.
The research mentions a story about him and the USS Philadelphia. Any truth to that?
Ah, yes, the legend. It's a good story, but U.S. Navy records actually name the guy responsible as Reis Mustafa, and he was from Crete, not Georgia.
Okay, so probably a mix-up there.
Seems likely, but Mustafa Gurgi was still incredibly influential, make no mistake.
How so?
Well, for starters, he married Yusuf Pasha's daughter, Fatima. That certainly helped cement his position.
Marrying into the family, classic move.
Right. And he was known for being dynamic, competent. He fixed up fortifications, built new ones, organized the artillery, even started paying salaries to sailors. Plus, he owned his own fleet of ships, which made him money.
Sounds like he got things done. What did others think of him?
European merchants apparently found him a bit intense. Stern, maybe fanatical was the word used.
Okay. And he stuck around through political turmoil later on.
He did. He backed the Pasha during the revolution in the 1830s, and even after the Ottomans took direct control back, he stayed on as head of the port. He was respected enough to even sign a peace agreement between the Ottomans and local leaders in 1842.
So he navigated those tricky political waters pretty well.
Seems so. There's also a British dispatch from 1845 that mentions Mustafa, Georgia, owning a cargo of enslaved black people from Central Africa. A grim reminder of the times, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, the Gudi Mosque, that's named after him, obviously. What's the story there?
Well, there's a popular tale that Yusuf Pasha offered him a captured ship as a reward, and Mustafa said, "No thanks, I'll use the money to build a mosque instead."
A nice story.
It is, but the research suggests it's more likely he just used his own considerable fortune, maybe including money from selling one of his own ships in 1831 to build it. It was finished in 1834.
And it was quite something.
Oh, yeah. A whole complex mosque, school, mausoleum, very distinct architecture, richly decorated. And his name lives on today in Tripoli districts, streets, even an oasis are named Guji, a lasting legacy.
Truly. And it wasn't just in Tripoli that Georgians held power, was it?
No, that's right. In 1820, another Georgian renegade, Mustafa al-Ammar, was made Bey governor of the Fezzan province south of Tripoli.
Ah, the Fezzan, heading into the Sahara.
Exactly. He led a successful military campaign against the Bornu kingdom nearby in the early 1820s. Sadly, he died near the end of 1823. But it shows Georgian influence wasn't just confined to the capital.
We've talked a lot about the men. What about Georgian women? You mentioned the harems earlier. The research covers them too, right?
It does, though the information is more scattered, as you might expect, but they were definitely there. We have these first-hand accounts from Mrs. Tully, who was part of the British consul's family in Tripoli.
What did she observe?
She wrote about the Karamanli family, sending agents specifically to Georgia and Circassia to buy women. And often, the first one to bear the ruler, a son, would become a favored wife.
Right, and there's a specific story about a woman named Lila Umnani.
Yes, a very poignant one. Tully sometimes calls her Greek, probably because Georgians were Greek Orthodox Christians. But in a letter from 1784, Tully tells how Umnani, who is about 17, and her younger sister were sold by their father to a Tripolitan ambassador, Haji Abdurrahman.
Sold by their own father. That's harsh.
It is. And Tully describes how hard it was for them. New religion, new customs, new language. Umnani apparently talked wistfully about Georgia, how beautiful and fertile it was.
It must have been incredibly difficult. But she seems to have adapted. Somewhat. Does her story tell us much about others like her?
It gives us a precious glimpse. Umnani apparently had some education already, drawing, singing, music, maybe a foreign language. She converted to Islam, married the ambassador within a year, had children. She got introduced to the ruling family, met European diplomats' wives. But what's really striking is that she kept in touch with her family back in Georgia.
Really? Yeah.
Exchanging letters, sending them money. She even eventually managed to bring her brother over to Tripoli.
Wow. Across all that distance and cultural change, she maintained that connection.
Exactly. And she was protected by the ruling household, inherited her husband's property when he died in 1793. It's an amazing story of resilience and keeping those family ties alive.
That's incredible. Testament to her strength. And her story even made ripples outside Tripoli.
It did. Tully's account inspired artists and writers in Britain. There was a poem called Georgian Sisters, published with a picture in 1838, and another one in 1847 called The Georgian, or The Moor of Tripoli.
So her experience resonated far away.
Absolutely. It shows how these individual stories could travel and capture imaginations, and Tully mentions meeting other women from the Caucasus, too, Circassians, even a Christian woman in these elite households. So Umnani wasn't entirely unique in her origins.
Right. So bringing this all together, what are the main takeaways about Georgians in Ottoman Tripoli?
Well, the research makes it pretty clear that Georgian and other Caucasian slaves were a definite feature of Tripoli from the 17th century on. They mostly came via the Istanbul slave market.
And they weren't just at the bottom.
Far from it. They became part of the ruling elite, military administration, even diplomacy, as we saw. Success and marrying well could lead them right to the top.
And the women, like Amnani, show that maintaining links home was possible.
Yes, at least for some. Her case and her sister's suggest others might have done so too, even if it's not always in the records. History tends to remember the big names, right?
True.
So it's very likely there was a wider Georgian and Caucasian presence that's just less documented. The bottom line seems to be that deliberately recruiting men and women from Georgia and Circassia was a regular, ongoing thing in Ottoman Tripoli.
This has been absolutely fascinating, a real deep dive for you, the learner. We've uncovered this significant but often forgotten Georgian presence and influence right at the heart of Ottoman Tripoli's society and power structures.
Yeah, and some of the details are just amazing, aren't they? Georgian diplomats hobnobbing in European courts, a Georgian guy briefly running the whole province, another governing the Fizan.
And the women, like little Amnani, navigating that complex world in the harems, but still managing to reach back home.
Exactly.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Thinking about these individual stories. What other hidden histories of movement, influence, and connection are still buried in the records of the Ottoman Empire or elsewhere?
Mm-hmm. And what was it that drove people like Amnani to maintain those links across such huge distances and deep cultural divides?
It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.